only real content is gonna last. All that other nonsense is here today and gone tomorrow.
It was actually the social component of the Pepsi Super Bowl campaign in 2019. So what happened was 2 weeks before the Super Bowl, Pepsi decided, hey, we don't want to just run our TV Super Bowl ad on social media. We want to create unique commercials that are just for social media. And it needs to be live Super Bowl weekend in 2 weeks.
Welcome, everybody, back to another episode of Navigating Now, a different podcast. I am your host, Jay Bartlett, and today we are joined by the founder and CEO of 5 to 60, Forbes 30 Under 30 member, YPO member. It is my pleasure to welcome Nic Weinfeld onto the podcast. Nic, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Now, with Navigating Now, we like to highlight the background stories of our guests. So let's bring it to the beginning. Can you tell us a bit about where you're from, where you grew up, and what your childhood was like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in the Washington, D.C. suburbs in Maryland, a little town called Silver Spring, Maryland. And my upbringing was pretty normal. I was fortunate to go to a public middle school in Silver Spring, Maryland that had a film class in 6th grade. And that's really where my whole career and passion for storytelling started. So I took that class in middle school and was really the only student that took it seriously. And I remember going home after school one day and asking my parents if this was, something that could be a career for me, and they're very supportive and told me that there are film directors and producers out there that make a living doing what you're doing in your 6th grade class. So having their support, I really set my vision on doing exactly that and starting a production company. And one of, the first goals that I set for myself was, how do I get into USC Film School? Because I just Googled top film school in America, and that was, the number one result. So I was like, all right, I got to find a way to get into USC Film School. And from there, I was working backwards, figuring out how am I going to stand out? How am I going to build the best application possible? And so I spent most of my middle school just shooting films, recruiting, local middle schoolers to donate their time and their resources to come over to my house on weekends and shoot little short films that unfortunately are still on YouTube. If you Google my name, you can see some of my middle school work. And from there, that just naturally evolved to some small businesses in the DC area hitting me up for, low budget projects, some music videos from, the local high schoolers that were starting bands. And that really introduced me to the business aspect of filmmaking. And I was like, really energized and excited about that aspect. So I knew early on, I didn't want to just be a director. I wanted to combine my interest in business with my interest in storytelling. And that's where I, discovered commercial filmmaking and saw that as an aspect of the industry where I could combine both the business and the creative side. So I started, pursuing that a little bit more seriously. Took a lot more advertising, marketing classes on the side, and ended up getting a scholarship to go to this filmmaking high school in northern Michigan called Interlochen Arts Academy. They have a summer program, summer camp, as well as a boarding high school. And I got a scholarship to go there for my last 2 years of high school, where I worked on over 60 short films with my classmates, 2 of which I directed and wrote, 2 of which I produced, and then got exposure working on every single crew position that's a part of bringing a film to life. So that experience, not only taught me what each role does on a production, but also gave me a body of work that was able to catch the attention of USC Film School and earn me a spot in their film production program. So from there, I started this company, 5 to 60, as a sophomore through a class there called Art of the 60-Second Story. So that was the first class I took USC that really aligned with this passion and this direction I was headed in. And through that class, my professor actually brought in a real Coca-Cola Mexico brief that we could pitch on. And I pitched an idea, and they gave me $5,000 to go shoot a spec commercial for Coca-Cola Mexico. And it ended up getting used and earned me a small award at the Cannes Lions Advertising Festival in France. So they flew me out as a sophomore, gave me an award at Cannes Lions, and while I was there, I met a few advertising people that worked at an ad agency in New York called AKQA, and they recruited me to go work for AKQA that summer between my sophomore and junior year. And by the end of that internship, I had built the connections and had people starting to try to hire me to go make real commercials. So I went back to my USC professor from that class and I said, what should I do? I got people asking me to, make commercials for them, and school starts in 2 weeks. Like, what would you do in my position? And he said I would drop out and I would just go for it, because momentum is everything in, commercial production, and you have momentum starting, so just go for it. And so I called up my parents and I was like, Mom, Dad, I'm dropping out of USC Film School. I know I wanted to go there my whole life, but I think, I got to move to New York and just go for it. And they were like, all right, sounds good, but we're giving you $0 more and you're totally cut off, and you got to live with whatever you got. So moved to New York. I think I had $800 or $900 in my bank account. My rent was $1,200, and I basically just hit the ground running, met every single person that would take a coffee with me, had, 5-6 meetings every day that month, and by the end had landed a $60,000 contract to do 3 short documentaries. And that was enough to basically pay my rent for the whole year. So and that really started it and started the growth, and yeah, that was really the origin of 5 to 60, and kind of started the path that I'm on today.
Yeah, no, that's dope, man. And we have a really similar backstory. Like, we both started our companies as sophomores in college, won the business competition. And it's funny because you say, like, oh, your goal was to go to USC, and then you got to tell your parents you dropped out. But, like, really, you achieving that, it was like your intuition kind of guiding you to that highest place. It's like you needed to go to USC, but then you achieved at the highest level there. That's what, like, kickstarted your whole career. So
yeah, and everybody that works for my company, most of the crews we hire have some sort of tie to the network that came out of going there. So it definitely wasn't for nothing. I still got a ton of value and feel the power of the network every day. So kind of got the best of both worlds as it played out.
Yeah. So as you kind of got those first opportunities when you were in New York, what did it take for you to go from, like, that first month, like you said you had like $800, to really scaling the company to where 5 to 60 was like a known name in media?
Yeah. So I think the big turning point that got us, from sub $1 million in revenue to, well over that was when I realized that I couldn't do everything myself, and I wasn't the best person to do every role in my company. So
when was that? Was there like a moment that clicked?
Yeah, I think it was about 2 years into living in New York where I was getting really busy as an individual, but I was, I'd always kind of set this goal for myself. Like, I want to make $1 million in revenue a year. Like, once I make $1 million in revenue, I'll feel like I made it, which isn't true, by the way. But when I was, struggling to get to that revenue mark, I realized that a large part of it was because I was limited not only by my time, but by my body of work. So by expanding out to working with other people, not only would that give me more manpower, but it also gave me new portfolios to showcase. So all of a sudden, I wasn't just limited by my body of work. I was able to look at the project and say, hey, I know this female comedy director that speaks Spanish. Like, I would have never won that job, but she's perfect for this job. Let me pitch her. And then all of a sudden, I was ultimately servicing the client in the best way possible, because I wasn't just convincing them that I was right for every job, but I was connecting them with the perfect director to bring their project to life. And that was a pretty new business model at the time. Most companies that I was competing against represented just 5 to 8 directors that they pitched for every job. And I saw that as something that could be a little disrupted if I came in and said, forget that model, I'm going to really find the perfect director for each job and match to the project. And so I kind of became this matchmaker consultant to just put together these bespoke teams to bring the productions to life.
Cool. Yeah, I remember when we first met, like a big thing I took away from our conversation was like outputting systems to other people and like how to efficiently do that. Since we had that conversation, I've created so much stuff for that. Like, we did a whole bunch of like onboarding material, and like we brought on a bunch of new people, but just creating all those systems for efficiency. Because I agree with that sentiment, like delegation, once you learn that, because like as the entrepreneur, you have to master the skill yourself, but once you can give your own systems to other people, do that. And that's really how I think you're able to scale.
Yeah, they talk about working on your business versus in your business, and if you want to scale, you want to be working on your business, not in your business. So that's an important mindset shift to make if you want to grow.
For sure.
So
I want to ask though, you kind of achieved what some people consider like a pinnacle achievement. Forbes 30 under 30. Congratulations. First. And I just want to ask, what did you have to do to achieve Forbes 30 under 30?
Yeah, well, I don't know exactly, how the behind the scenes works, so I'm not gonna be able to provide any, insider tips, but my secret is I applied, between ages 18 and 28, and on the 10th application, I got selected. So, I think that sums up entrepreneurship right there. Where it's like, the more no's you get, the closer you are to a yes. And I just was, I kind of, this last year that I applied, I was like, you know what, if they don't take me this year, I'm over it. So I just kind of sent in that one final application and got it. I think, it's a lot of it is subjective. I know companies that have gotten on it and the next year they're bankrupt. So I'm sure there's many examples of successful entrepreneurs that never got it, that went on to do much bigger and better things. So I think it's a cool honor, but definitely not make or break. And I will say I don't feel like it has really changed anything for my business or me personally. So for all the people listening that really, think that's gonna change their life, I'm here to say it's cool, but definitely not the end all be all goal that you should have.
All right. So pivoting from that then, again, kind of getting back to what makes the company successful. A big thing I think for scaling as well as delegation has been softwares for efficiency. So are there any softwares that make a huge difference to you and your company?
Yeah, I mean the basic ones: Slack, Google Suite, Adobe. I think those are kind of a given in our industry. But I would say what really took us to the next level was using a management software called Monday.com. It's pretty popular for project managers, but we used that software to implement an operating system that our whole company learned last year called EOS, Entrepreneurs Operating System. It's part of a larger book called Traction that I recommend any entrepreneur read and learn this operating system. So essentially, we were taught EOS, Entrepreneurs Operating System, and used Monday.com to integrate that operating system into a virtual online shared site that we could all access as remote employees working across different time zones, across different states and countries. So what that looks like for us is, on a high level, it documents our 10-year plan, our unique value prop, our core values, our vision, mission statement. But boiled down, it goes, to a 12-month plan and then further into quarterly plans. So you actually set what's called 90-day rocks, which are, breaking down your long-term vision into what needs to happen in the next 90 days to, make progress toward that long-term goal. And then we also have simple things like to-do lists and standing meetings that are run through that software. So it's just really helped us all be on the same page. I think big thing as a remote company with employees all over the place is you don't always know what the other people on your team are working on. And there can be, some questions of, are they actually doing anything? So this has kind of solved that by really providing a lot of transparency into people's day-to-days and always holding each other accountable for what you're trying to get done that week.
Cool. Yeah, like a task flow manager. I use Notion in my company, but like for the similar purposes that you do, I'm kind of set up the same way.
Yeah.
So next, I want to ask, looking for clients, obviously the clients you kind of don't have says more about you than some of the clients that you do work with. What do you think creatives should look for in clients?
Yeah, I mean, I think starting out, you gotta kind of say yes to everything, which I think some people out there wouldn't give that advice, but I've seen it firsthand where I say yes to a job that I almost said no to, and it turns into, massive opportunity either by way of introduction or that person moves to a new position and takes you with them. There's a lot of ways that it can evolve. So I'm not so much of the camp of you should screen clients initially, at least. I think that's more of a luxury, not so much a necessity off the start. you have to remember you don't have to put everything you film or create on your website. So at the end of the day, you gotta also be a smart business person and make good financial decisions on how to get your company to profitability. So I think that initially starts with, saying yes to a lot of jobs, as long as you can make them profitable and think they're going to be good people to work with. And maybe that's really the answer to your question, is trying to get a sense for how much respect the clients have for you and how much they're willing to listen to you. You don't want to get into a situation where you're underpaid, you're undervalued, and you're going to be blamed for every problem. That does, happen. It happened to me a few times in my career, saying yes to a job I should have said no to. But at the end of the day, if you really feel out the client and deem, they're a good person and have a good heart, I think it's worth working with them and trying to see where the relationship goes. But if they're going to be, a jerk from the start and just walk all over you, I think that's the time to go a different direction and redirect your efforts elsewhere.
Yeah. I like this story or a fable with like the boy and the rock. I don't know if you know that one. Yeah. Like who you show the rock to kind of determines your value.
Yeah. Well said.
But yeah, I want to ask now more for yourself as the founder and the operator of the company. As that business scaled right in front of you, how did your day-to-day evolve personally?
Yeah, I mean, definitely this notion of working on the business versus in, and turning my focus to more long-term vision and high-level relationships and less day-to-day in the weeds of the projects. Like, for instance, I probably go on 1 out of every 10 shoots we have, whereas 5 years ago I went to every single one. So my day-to-day has become a lot more thinking about the future of the company, where we're headed, and building the relationships I deem necessary to get us there. So I do miss being on set and being around that creative energy, but also enjoy my new day-to-day role of being more of a visionary, thinking about the future of the company and where we want to go.
Yeah. And on that point of like networking for that highest level of business, how would you say you have or what would you say has been the key to collaborating with some of the leading brands that you've worked with?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all comes down to relationships and someone that's willing to walk you in the door of these, big clients or big agencies. And so it's just like any relationship, you gotta, build trust. And I find that always coming from a place of both how I can help you and also a place of I want to learn something from you is a great like entry point as you're starting out to build relationships with potential clients. Whereas if you come in and you're just immediately like, I know what I'm doing, check out how good I am at everything, I think people are going to be a lot less willing to, take you under their wing and walk you in. I think that's the image to getting started, is like you gotta kind of enter under people's wings. Like you're not gonna just walk in through the front door and be like, I'm here, I'm a sophomore in college with a cool company, like hire me. You gotta kind of find your way in and build that relationship that earns the trust of that person to, put you forth and get you that job.
Were there any like particular areas that you found were really important for you networking, either like in person or online?
Yeah, I mean, I think just living in New York City was a huge aspect of my success. Like, I came from LA and USC Film School, where in LA, you can have 2 meetings a day at max. And when you're young, too, somebody would probably cancel that second meeting while you're like parking and putting money in the meter. So just kind of the culture from my experience has been a lot less willing to meet with young people and help them out in LA. And living in New York, I would just basically, I formed this 2 sentence email that I sent to everybody that was like, congratulations on your new work, XYZ. I'm a big fan, love what you did. Would you be willing to let me buy you a cup of coffee and pick your brain for tips for 5 minutes? And those 5-minute coffees always turn into an hour or more. And, in New York, at least, I was able to have, 5 to 6 a day just by getting around on the subway. And a lot of those didn't lead to places, but, in our line of work, you just need, 1 out of every 100 to pan out, and you got a successful business. So I find it's really a numbers game. In person is generally better than virtual for building those relationships and getting to know each other. But the more volume of meetings you can have at the start of your journey, the better. And I think the quicker you'll find success in what you're looking for.
No, for sure. Like you said, finding the volume and finding the place to do it. I agree with that sentiment. Like New York definitely has a zeitgeist over LA where you could kind of just walk through the park and like find some people and actually have a conversation, have a relationship. Whereas in LA, it's a little more like, who are you before you even talk to me?
You just show me your resume, yeah.
Right. But like, even on that networking point, like for me, like when I started my company, like I was a sophomore like you, but junior year was COVID. And so I was in New York doing all of that. And then COVID hit. So my resource became LinkedIn. And that's how we connected.
Yeah, yeah. No, LinkedIn can be great too. But it's tough because most of the people that you're trying to network with are receiving, thousands of LinkedIn messages or emails every day from people like you. So it's just, how do you stand out? And I think that goes back to what I was saying a few minutes ago of really coming from a place of, I'm going to buy you a cup of coffee and I want to learn something from you. Because then you're kind of triggering that helpful, side of people's brains where they want to give back and help the next generation. So that's what it's all about.
Yeah. I would say like something I observed is when you do find like that 1 out of 100 person, like successful people are generally very willing to pass along their success to other people that they see themselves in. They're usually very willing to share information, open doors, mentor, all of that, if they see that you take what you're doing seriously.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's another good point, is finding people that have similar backgrounds as you and kind of standing out in that way can be pretty effective as well.
Yeah, like on that point of standing out, like doing things, kind of creating your own story and crafting like something where if you go and tell people or people are exposed to your experiences, that speaks volumes of who you are, almost like social credit before you even walk in the door. And for you, one of those projects, like you created a Pepsi Super Bowl commercial. And so like that's one of those things where it's like, okay, you create Super Bowl commercials that just says something about your agency, the level that you're creating at. But such a cool, fun project, I'm sure. Can you tell us the story about just how that whole thing happened, how the deal came about, and what that project was like for you?
Yeah, that was very, very crazy one. It was actually the social component of the Pepsi Super Bowl campaign in 2019. So what happened was 2 weeks before the Super Bowl, Pepsi decided, hey, we don't want to just run our TV Super Bowl ad on social media. We want to create unique commercials that are just for social media. And it needs to be live Super Bowl weekend in 2 weeks. And it's two separate commercials. You got Jay Farrow in one and Joel McHale in the other, and figure out a way to make our timeline and our budget work. So what we proposed, which I still think was probably the only way to get it done, was to do both commercials in a single take, which means one shot, no cuts to other camera angles like you have in most commercials, just one continuous 60-second shot that gets us through the whole commercial. So they loved that idea, and we were off to the races to pull together a production that was in that style. And in order to film a one-take commercial, there's a lot of choreography that goes into it. So it's a lot about not only how do the celebrities move through the space, but how does the set move in and out of the frame to get us all these different scenes in one take. So the biggest lift of that project was the art department figuring out how to construct those sets, not only on the time frame they had, but also allowing them to move in that single take and achieve the vision that the director pitched and ultimately sold through. So that came together just in time, and then on the day of, I think it was take 56 or 57 that we ended up using. So every take we got a little bit closer, but there'd be just something a little bit off and had to run it back. But just at the end of the day, we got it in the can both days, and then we're able to, I think, in 48 to 72 hours, pull it together, because there wasn't any editing required in a single take. It was just about color correction, audio, mixing, sound design, final touches to get it over to Pepsi and on social media in time for the weekend. And from what we were told, it actually was watched more times than the TV spot was in the moment, because what people nowadays do when TV ads come on is they go on Instagram or TikTok. And so when that happened, they watched our, social media Super Bowl campaign. So it received just over 58 million views that weekend. And yeah, still is, I consider, one of our best spots that a lot of people, cold email us or call us to work with us because of that project. So, yeah, it was a fun one.
Yeah. And that's a really interesting insight, too, that you said you got more impressions on Pepsi's actual social media Super Bowl commercial than the TV one, just because of the nature of how people like actually do just go straight to their phones when the commercial comes on. Like that human nature is shifted.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to make them, I think it was really smart on Pepsi's part to not just repurpose the TV spot, but to make it specifically for social. We shot it in the square vertical format, so it looked very native to the platform, and ultimately performed very. So, yeah.
Going on to another project, Kodama, your new film premiered at South by Southwest. And this whole time with your company, 5 to 60, like you've been evolving in just your creation and visuals and film. So I want to ask, can you speak on your ambition to create in short form versus long form mediums, doing commercials versus more feature film stuff? What have you enjoyed? What is the process like for you?
Yeah, so the long-term vision is to both do commercials, film, and TV at 5 to 60. So that's, what we see as our 10-year plan, and working backward from that. Our roadmap to get there is to support filmmakers that we think are going to be big players in those spaces. So what you're seeing us produce now is short form content that are projects we ultimately really believe in the director and the creatives behind it. So we're not so much producing it to make money or to get press. It's more about supporting these people we believe in. So it's donating to their project, providing insurance, providing resources to make their short film possible. So when they do go on to make that feature film version of Kodama, they call us to, bring us in the project and help bring it to life. So those are more like small bets that we're placing on people we believe in and helping them advance in their careers, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it's cool. Always want to figure out how to, I guess, just expand more into, I guess, like your passions. So that's awesome. A connection that you made with your company, I think is really interesting, is you were able to partner with VaynerMedia. Going back to the networking, I guess, can you tell the story of how you partner with VaynerMedia and how others can approach potentially partnering with large advertising agencies?
Yeah, so that one was actually directly out of that internship I spoke about at AKQA, New York. So one of the people that was an employee there when I was an intern ended up going over to VaynerMedia and being a producer over there. And it was just kind of a good fit for the account that he was in charge of. They needed a lot of value for a small budget, and he knew that he could, trust me and I could make it work because I was just starting out. So that's how I got in the door there, which, looking back, the advice I would give to anyone trying to get those relationships starting out is spend a summer interning at a big ad agency, because everybody that works in advertising, especially in New York, switches agencies like every 3 weeks. So
Right.
when you build that initial network from your internship at an agency that summer, then those people are going to go places and you'll be able to hit them up, tell them what you're doing, and they'll be able to take you under their wing and get you into some of these places. Further along, like nowadays, how we get into new agencies is a combination of me continuing to do that, following, people that I have relationships with, and when they switch agencies, I hit them up and do some sort of general screening or lunch and learn meeting with the agency to, introduce us to the wider team. And then we also have sales agents that represent our company and work in different regions of the United States, and they're constantly having lunch with different agencies, telling them about us, and a lot of those, efforts lead to proper introductions and getting us in the door and starting to be considered for projects that they're producing.
Cool. That's good insight. Next question, again, to try to gain some insight for people. What advice would you give just in general for people wanting to follow an entrepreneurial path? I guess I want to target with this question, like, what do you feel like is most important in the mindset that you had to create to be successful as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little cliche, but resilience and grit are probably the two things that come to mind. I mean, it's so brutal, like the amount of rejection that I face on a day-to-day basis, and um, it's a lot of weeks you'll just feel like every morning you're waking up to get slapped in the face, and then you get up and you get punched in the gut, and you gotta find a way to pull yourself out of bed the next day. So I think just learning that every no is like one step closer to a yes, and starting to change your mindset to actually find like excitements or some silver lining in the rejection that you're facing is pretty crucial, because there's multiple instances where I've been like, I don't know if I can keep doing this. I hate this. Like, I don't, I just want a 9 to 5 job where I know I'm going to make X amount of dollars every year, and I'll just, be a lot happier because of it. But it's always that, next time you get up to the plate that you finally hit that home run and you're back on track. So yeah, it's just about being comfortable with failing, essentially, and being okay with hearing no 1,000 times, because as we said a few times in this call, you just need that one person to say yes, and it can lead to millions of dollars in revenue.
Yeah. No, I like that saying that you keep bringing up, like the no's. Every no you get is just like getting you closer to the yes. Like having that mindset. I think that's actually really powerful.
Yeah, and like another thing that's kept me going is like, holy shit, I just lost a project to Director X. It's like, fuck, man, that's so cool. Like, I grew up, you know, uh, idolizing Director X, and now I just lost a job to him. Like, it was between my company and his. Like, I'd love to get that no all day, So.
All right, shows you're at least in the right room.
Exactly. So.
Going on to some of our last few questions. For you personally, are there any pieces of art that made a significant impact on you, that you would want to share? And yeah, can you explain how that art made that impact? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think, one of the films that I saw in middle school that really ignited my passion for filmmaking was the film Donnie Darko, which is, an old sci-fi movie with Jake Gyllenhaal. I still love it today, but the reason it really inspired me was, one, it was a USC student, first year out of school, that made this film. And I really became obsessed with the backstory of like how he got it made, how he got Jake Gyllenhaal, Drew Barrymore, all these actors in it. And the story itself is very just philosophical and makes you kind of question your existence and all that. And to leave that film with both the understanding and excitement about how it got made and how this, fresh out of USC filmmaker was able to bring it to life, combined with just the story and all the questions it left in my head, was really something that inspired me to keep on the path and keep trying to create things that ultimately raised questions like that, and the audience's mind of people watching the work that we produce.
And off the piece of art that impacted you, I want to ask, because you're in media creation, is there camera gear or a specific tool that impacted the art you create in a major way?
I think, having access to DSLRs and all the cameras that were affordable to me as a middle school and high schooler were extremely transformational in my journey. Like, that's something that, even 10 years before, I wouldn't have been able to get my hands on a camera till college, probably. So having a camera in my hand starting in sixth grade really allowed me to, take my career to the next level quickly. So I think that was huge. And then the other thing, I grew up obsessed with Vimeo, and Vimeo has a aspect of their site called Vimeo Staff Picks, where they feature the best video of the day, essentially. So I would go on there religiously every day and watch every single one of those videos, and even message the filmmakers sometimes, asking them questions about how they made it. And that, was the source of inspiration for me, combined with the access to these cheaper cameras allowed me to go out immediately and try to, figure out how they achieved what was the staff pick of the day on Vimeo, and learn from that.
Yeah. Nah, so I've been doing some more research on cameras recently. And I saw recently I forget what it's called, but they're dropping like a major movie on the Sony FX3, which is like handheld, like, I mean, it's not super cheap. It's like $4,000, but feature film that's like made on kind of like a consumer camera nowadays is kind of incredible. So just the access that people have to create is great.
Yeah, there's a few examples of movies that have, won awards at Sundance, or, gone out to be commercial successes that were shot on cell phones. We shot a big, commercial campaign during COVID on iPhones. So there's really, and those cameras are going to keep getting better. So I think that access to tools and like barrier to entry is going to continue to be, lowered, and people from all over the world will be able to create high quality videos all of a sudden. So that's a great thing.
Yeah. Next, something we ask all of our guests: what does different mean to you?
Yeah, I would say different to me means learning about the path people took before you, and then figuring out what time has changed about that path that they took. So, kind of the idea that no man steps in the same stream twice, because the man and the stream have changed. And I think a lot of people, and a lot of teachers say, like, this is how this director 20 years ago got to where they are. And I've always been like, okay, so I'm not going to do that, because it's 20 years, 20 years in the future from when that happened. So I think different to me is learning about those who came before you, but acknowledging that the times are different, and therefore your path is going to look different.
Yeah. I really like that quote you brought up with the man in the stream.
Yeah.
That's a
good
one.
one.
Next one, 3 truths that you would leave with everyone, like on your tombstone.
Yeah. I think the first one is, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, but like, don't be a dick, or be kind. I think that's such a easy one to forget, especially as you start to find success in your entrepreneurial journey. It's like you never should be an asshole, because you never know like where somebody is gonna end up. I mean, the industry is just so small that most of the time, even if you don't like someone, they'll end up being in a position down the road where they may hire you for something. So I think that's, number one is just be a good person and be kind to everybody and always take the high road, because, you just don't know how things are going to go, and you should never burn a bridge. And then I think next truth would be to really take care of yourself. I think many entrepreneurs just work themselves to their end and burn out really easily. And it took me a while to learn this truth, but I think as soon as I started prioritizing my well-being over my business, I ended up having a better business. So I think, really finding what works for you and gets you in the best headspace possible is going to ultimately lead to success. And that starts by taking care of yourself. And then lastly, I think the idea of just never being comfortable with where you're at, never resting on your laurels. I mean, I kind of alluded to it earlier with the Forbes 30 under 30 thing, but that's just like a recognition. It's not something that is going to really change things. So I think you never want to have goals that you achieve that give you a certain level of security or comfort. Like, you always want to be changing things, pivoting, looking for what you can do better, what you can improve on, and that starts by never being too comfortable. So that probably rounded out for me.
No, very, very well said. Robust truths. I like the last one because, like, again, going back to the Forbes thing for you, like separating recognition versus accomplishment is huge.
And at the end of the day, I think entrepreneurship is a sport where you're against yourself, and it's all like, how good can you be? Can you be better than yesterday? And as soon as you stop comparing yourself to others and stop, reaching for these superficial recognitions or accomplishments, you're going to be a better entrepreneur because you're just trying to be a little bit better than yesterday.
Yeah, I have that on the home screen on my iPad. It says, "Thank God the game is always against myself."
Yeah, there you go.
For real. All right, it was a pleasure, Nick. So, let people know where can people find your work, support your company, shout out all your links. Where can people find you?
Yeah, sure. Definitely, give us a follow on Instagram. That's where we post all of our new projects, post some behind the scenes content, as well as some other fun series we do. And that's just at the number 5TO, the number 60. And then our website, which is the same, www.number5to60.com, is also updated with all of our featured work and our wonderful team. You can learn more about them and a little bit about their stories as well. And definitely hit me up if I can help any of you guys listening. I'm happy to take a meeting with any of you and offer any advice I may have.
Well, God bless you for that, man. And I thank you for your time with me today and giving everybody some knowledge and some gems. I think it'll be inspiring to people who want to create in all medium, social media, film, and otherwise. So thank you, Nick.
Yeah, thank you. This has been great.